I didn't catch them in bed. I didn't even catch them kissing. What I caught was worse, because it was proof that the two people I loved most were planning a future where I didn't exist. My best friend. My fiancée. A house key between them on the kitchen table, whispered promises that sounded like funeral bells to me. That's where this story starts, and it ends in fire, my fire, burning down everything they thought they'd built without me. If you're new here, subscribe right now, because this isn't some cheap drama. This is the anatomy of betrayal, the price of sacrifice, and the taste of revenge when it's earned drop by drop. And while you're listening, hit the comments. Have you ever had someone stab you in the back so deep it changed who you are forever? Her name was Lila. My fiancée. My partner. The person I'd been saving for, building for, bleeding for. I had worked 3 jobs at one point just to scrape enough to put a down payment on that little townhouse she said she wanted, the one with the ivy crawling up the brick like it had secrets of its own. Every blister on my hand, every late night where my body begged me to quit, I told myself it was worth it because Lila deserved the world. My best friend's name was Marcus. He wasn't just a friend, he was my brother in everything but blood. We'd survived broken homes, scrapped our way through school together, and when one of us fell, the other carried him. He was there the night my father left. I was there the night he nearly drank himself into the grave. Marcus wasn't just in my life, he was stitched into my skin. So when the two of them started spending more time together, Lila insisting it was only because Marcus understood how stressed I was lately, I told myself it was harmless. That's what trust does, it blinds you, softens the edges until you can't see the knife being raised. Quick pause here, if you've ever ignored a red flag because you loved someone too much, drop a "yeah" in the comments. Let's see how many of us missed the signs that should have saved us. The night it broke, I came home early. I wasn't supposed to be back for hours. The house was dark except for the kitchen. I crept closer, grinning like an idiot, thinking maybe I'd surprise Lila with flowers, maybe Marcus had dropped by to watch the game with me. Instead, I froze at the threshold. On the table, lit by the amber glow of the hanging lamp, was a set of keys. Lila's hand brushed them toward Marcus, her voice low but sharp with urgency. You'll move in once he's out. No more waiting. He's too blind to see what's happening anyway. And Marcus, my Marcus, nodded, leaned close, kissed her hand, and whispered, he'll never see it coming. Do you know what it feels like when the air itself betrays you? When every breath cuts your throat because you realize your life is just a stage and you've been the fool all along? I backed away, stomach twisted, pulse thundering in my ears. For a second, I wanted to storm in, scream, break every glass in that kitchen. But something stopped me. Because while I was standing there in the shadows, I noticed something else. A folder on the counter. Not just any folder, my name on it. My name, scrawled in Lila's handwriting. And when Marcus touched it, I saw the edge of a document that made no sense. Legal papers. Financial papers. My accounts. My signature forged. That's when I realized, it wasn't just betrayal of love. It wasn't even just Marcus stealing the woman I'd built my life around. This was deeper, colder. They were erasing me, stealing everything I'd bled for, together. You might be shocked because what I found in that folder made me question whether Marcus was really the only best friend who had sold me out. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what was next, because the second betrayal? It cut deeper than anything Lila and Marcus had done. When you catch your best friend and your fiancé plotting to erase you, you don't breathe the same way again. You don't trust footsteps on the stairs, or the whisper of your own name. That night, standing in the shadows with my heart clawing at my ribs, I thought I'd already hit bottom. But the truth? That was just the appetizer. Because betrayal rarely comes alone. It travels in packs. And the second knife, the one that came from the world I thought I'd built with my own hands, sliced deeper than anything Marcus and Lila had done together. Subscribe now if you're just joining us, because this is where the story widens. And tell me in the comments, would you rather be betrayed in love, or betrayed in business? Which one would destroy you more? The folder on the counter wasn't just about my accounts. Once I was finally alone and brave enough to pull copies from the home office later, I realized what they were holding over me, the business I'd been building for years. See, while Marcus was the brother of my soul, another man, Jonathan Hale, was my brother in ambition. He was my business partner. The guy I met when we were both nobodies trying to pitch half-baked ideas to bored investors. We'd slept in the same car during conventions when we couldn't afford hotel rooms. He was there the day our company finally broke even, popping champagne with me in plastic cups. Jonathan Hale was the one who taught me to believe in myself professionally, the way Marcus had personally. Two anchors in my life. Two different kinds of brothers. But in those papers, I saw Jonathan's signature. The betrayal was elegant, the kind that takes months to orchestrate. Legal filings, power of attorney documents, quiet transfers of assets that I never noticed because I trusted Lila to handle the household paperwork and Jonathan to handle the corporate filings. And when you trust the wrong people, you don't just fall, you're pushed. I traced the pages with trembling hands, bile rising as I realized what was happening. Jonathan hadn't just sold me out. He'd done it in tandem with them. Lila's handwriting was everywhere, her neat little initials beside forged versions of my own. Marcus's name appeared only once, but his fingerprints were all over the plan, providing addresses, notarizations, little details I knew only he had access to. It was all coordinated. Jonathan would take my half of the company. Lila would take my home, my savings, my future. Marcus would take whatever was left, my heart, my history, my trust. I wasn't just being replaced as a fiancé. I was being erased as a man. Quick pause, comment below if you've ever had someone steal your work, your ideas, your credit. Did it feel like suffocating? Or did it make you burn hot enough to start planning revenge like I did? I wanted to smash something. To drive to Jonathan's house, drag him out by his collar, scream in his face about the years we spent starving and hustling together. But rage like that? It's gasoline. If you light it too fast, you only burn yourself. So I shut the folder, locked it in my own safe, and forced myself to breathe. The betrayal was real, but so was the evidence. They thought they'd been careful. They thought I'd never see. But now I had everything I needed to prove who they really were. And more importantly, I had time. Because here's the truth, revenge isn't about striking back the moment you're cut. It's about bleeding quietly, patiently, until you know exactly where to put the knife in return. Over the next weeks, I played the role they expected me to. Smiling fiancé. Clueless friend. Overworked business partner. I shook Marcus's hand when he came by, even though my skin crawled. I kissed Lila goodnight with lips that tasted of poison. I sat in meetings with Jonathan, watching his mouth move while imagining how it would look when I finally took everything back. But I didn't strike. Not yet. Because something didn't add up. In the legal papers, there was a detail too neat, too perfect. A clause that suggested Jonathan hadn't just planned to push me out, he was planning to pin something bigger on me. Fraud. Embezzlement. Charges that would not just ruin me, but jail me. And here's the cliffhanger for tonight, the first time I saw evidence of that, it wasn't in the folder. It was in my email. An email forwarded by mistake. An email that proved Jonathan wasn't just stabbing me in the back, he was sharpening the blade with someone else I hadn't even suspected yet. Subscribe if you want to see how deep this web goes, because later, the third shadow steps out. And trust me, you won't see them coming. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's a single email, sent by mistake, landing in your inbox like a loaded gun. That's how I found the third shadow in this story, the one who made Marcus and Lila's scheming look like child's play, the one who turned Jonathan's betrayal into something criminal. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because this is the twist that blew my story wide open. And hit the comments with this: what's worse, being betrayed by love, by friendship, or by someone you didn't even know was in the game until they gutted you? The email came at 2:14 in the morning. I was awake, of course. Sleep had become impossible. My bed felt like quicksand, Lila's soft breathing beside me a lullaby for the knife twisting in my chest. So I sat at the desk, staring at the glow of my laptop, when it arrived. At first, I thought it was nothing. Subject line, final draft. Sent by Jonathan. But the recipient line, that's what froze me. He hadn't sent it to me. He'd sent it to someone else. Someone inside the company. And I'd only gotten it because he fat-fingered the CC. The attachment? A 30-page report outlining my supposed misuse of company funds, complete with forged receipts, fake approvals, and signatures that looked a little too much like mine. And the recipient? Our company's head of compliance. Her name was Evelyn Cross. Evelyn wasn't just some bureaucrat. She was the quiet architect who'd helped me and Jonathan clean up our books when we were starting out. She was sharp, calculating, the kind of woman who could find a decimal out of place in a sea of numbers. I trusted her because I had to, she'd seen everything. And now, here she was, colluding with Jonathan to frame me. The email wasn't casual. It was polished, professional, cold. Once Marcus provides notarized testimony regarding financial access, it read, we'll have everything necessary to push him out and proceed with the fraud charges. Lila's role will remain limited to asset transfer. By the time he realizes what's happened, it'll be irreversible. Marcus. Lila. Jonathan. Evelyn. 4 of them. Against one of me. Quick break. Drop a comment right now. How would you fight back if your enemies had love, friendship, money, and the law all on their side? What would you do? I want to see how ruthless you'd be. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat in silence, staring at the email, and I started to smile. Because finally, the entire board was visible. They thought I was already dead. They thought I'd fold, crawl into a hole, vanish. But you don't destroy a man like me with whispers and forged paper. No. You've got to bury me in concrete. You've got to cut my heart out. And they hadn't done that yet. So I began to plan. Step 1 was patience. Play the role. Smile at Lila like I still loved her. Laugh with Marcus like nothing had changed. Nod at Jonathan across the boardroom table like I hadn't seen the dagger in his hand. Thank Evelyn for her tireless work in keeping us compliant. Step 2 was gathering evidence. Not just copies of the email, but patterns. Times. Numbers. I bought a second phone, hidden in the lining of my jacket, used it to photograph everything I could get my hands on. Every time Lila left her purse unattended, I snapped shots of receipts. Every meeting with Jonathan, I recorded under the table. Step 3 was planting seeds. Little mistakes. Slight inconsistencies. I'd forget to sign something. I'd lose a piece of paper. I made them believe I was slipping, getting careless. And the more they thought I was crumbling, the bolder they became. And then came the night I knew my plan had teeth. Marcus invited me out for drinks. Just like old times, he said. I played dumb, smiled, agreed. He picked a quiet bar, the kind with booths shadowed enough to hide a deal or a betrayal. 2 beers in, he leaned across the table, eyes glassy, voice low. You don't get it, do you? He said. You've been holding us back for years. Me, Lila, even Jonathan. We deserve better. You were always too slow, too careful. That's why we did this." And then he grinned, like he'd already won. That was the first time I recorded his confession. His words, clear as glass, tucked safely into my second phone. I told myself I'd be quiet until everything was perfect. I lied. The moment the recording of Marcus's confession lived in my pocket, something in me stopped being patient and started being hungry. Patience is a strategy, hunger is a detonator. I decided to light the fuse and watch them all scramble. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button. If you've ever wanted to drop the perfect truth bomb, comment, drop it, and tell me where: kitchen, boardroom, wedding? You'll see why I chose my stage. They were celebrating the transfer. Jonathan had scheduled a closing luncheon under the pretense of congratulating the team, investors, the head of compliance, the lawyer who'd been greasing the gears, everyone who mattered to the plan. They wanted a date where the signatures would become history. They wanted witnesses. Irony tastes like pennies. I RSVP'd, yes. Walking in felt like walking past a jury of my own life. Lila in a dress that used to make me forget rent and plumbing, Marcus shaking hands like he was auditioning for a role he'd already stolen, Evelyn arranging plates with the kind of clinical calm that used to reassure me. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, the picture of the man who'd always called the shots. He smiled as I came in, a businessman's smile that never reached his eyes. "Glad you could make it, Henry," he said loud enough for the investors to hear. "We wouldn't have closed without you." If he knew the fireworks tucked in my jacket, he hid it well. If he thought he'd humiliated me into silence, he was wrong. I sat. I ordered water. I let the conversation wash over me like smoke. Quick poll: would you drop a truth bomb in public, or send the receipts quietly to the police? Type "public" or "quiet" in the comments. The louder route is messier, it's also more satisfying. I didn't stand up to speak. I didn't need to warm up the room. I waited for the moment they raised their glasses to new beginnings, then I hit play. The sound cut through the champagne bubbles like a thrown brick. Marcus's voice, raw and liquor thick, filled the room. "You don't get it, do you? You've been holding us back for years, we'll take everything and he won't see it coming." The recording was clean, no hiss, no ambiguity. Everyone went still. Conversations died mid-sentence. Utensils clinked against plates like tiny alarm bells. You could see the mapping of betrayal rearrange itself on their faces. Lila's smile froze, a color left her cheeks. Marcus's hand, which had been resting on the table, trembled in a way that said he wasn't thinking about the investors anymore, he was thinking about how fast the floor could open beneath him. Jonathan's jaw went stone. For half a heartbeat I thought he'd stand, rip the phone from the table, and shove it on the floor. Instead, the murmurs started. Investors whispered. The lawyer paled. Evelyn's eyes flicked between faces like a rat counting exits. "I have more," I said simply. I stood up, and the room refocused on me the way it does when the sun moves and everything else must squint. I set the second phone on the table, the one with the folder of copies I'd taken from the house and the company files, and slid them across so everyone could see. They should have arrested me there for grandstanding. Instead, they gasped. Some of the investors muttered about fiduciary duty. One of them, a man who'd been walled off from the company's daily grind, stood and walked slowly to the table, his face a study in astonished disappointment. "You've got proof," he said. "All of it?" "This is substantial." He used the careful language of men who will count losses before acting. He asked the lawyer to sit down. He picked up the phone with hands that were steady enough to be dangerous. I filmed their faces as they read the copies. I recorded Evelyn as she tried to explain that signatures were misaligned, that reconciliations were pending, that this was an unfortunate misunderstanding. I filmed Jonathan as he smiled that cold, small smile and said, "We can clear this up." There are protocols. I filmed Lila when her eyes met mine, desperation, not guilt, blinking like a child who just realized the toy was a trap. I posted the clip to my channels. I uploaded the recording to a private server and forwarded it to one journalist I'd contacted 2 nights before, a reporter who'd been asking about whistleblower protections. I sent it to my lawyer. I sent it to the one investor I knew had no patience for thieves. The news started to spread before dessert was served. People always imagine revenge as a movie edit: lights, a drop, reaction shots, fade to black. In real life, it's messy. Phones buzzed. An investor demanded immediate audits. The lawyer, sensing a collapsing airstrip, advised caution. The head of compliance tried to deflect, then froze when the investor demanded Evelyn's resignation. Marcus tried to stand, to deny, to claim entrapment, and his words were small and wet and useless against a recording. Henry, Lila started. She was trying to salvage something: pity, explanation, maybe even the last pieces of what had been our life. No, I said. The word was quiet and heavier than 1,000 shouts. You can't tell me that now. People clustered. Sides formed in a matter of minutes. The investors wanted the company secured. The lawyer wanted damage control. Some of the employees who'd been hovering by the service door stared like they were finally seeing the men who'd been quietly stealing their future. If you're feeling this with me, that click when someone you trusted turns out to be a snake, smash the like button. Let me know you're here. Then it got surreal. The investor who'd demanded action nodded to a security chief, and 2 men in plain clothes approached. Not police, private security hired by the board. One of them took the folder of documents I'd laid out and scanned them. Another asked for a copy of the recording. In a single, mechanical breath, the luncheon became a legal triage. Jonathan laughed once, low and brittle. You think a recording is going to undo years of structure, he said, as if he were explaining a math problem to a child. That was the moment I chose to stop being a witness and become an architect. I played Marcus's confession again, but slower, louder. I wanted their faces in high definition when what they'd done to me landed in the public square. I wanted the investors to feel the betrayal as viscerally as I had. They felt it. You could see trust exfiltrate the room like steam. As security escorted Evelyn out, her posture intact but her face a tight mask, Lila's brittle facade smashed like thin glass. She reached for me, and for a second I saw the woman I'd loved looking like someone who'd been caught in a lie too big to breathe. Please, she hissed. Please don't ruin everything. We can fix this. I said nothing. Words would have been a kindness she didn't deserve. Instead I pushed play on one last file, a voicemail Jonathan left his lawyer that I'd saved, where he spoke plainly about ensuring the narrative didn't get out and encouraging a graceful exit for me. The room made a collective, involuntary step back. In 6 minutes, the table that had been laughing about contracts and champagne dissolved into calls and furious whispers. Investors demanded emergency meetings. The lawyer excused himself. Security hovered like vultures. I sat down, tired in a way I hadn't been since before Lila and I signed the mortgage. The room moved around me like a tide. I felt a little sick with triumph. The strike had landed. The plan had teeth. The wolves had shown their underbellies. Quick cliffhanger for you: would you celebrate in private, or go public and watch them fall? Tell me which in the comments. I want to know if you'd keep the receipts or light the bonfire. But here's the twist that made my heart drop. As the investor at the head of the table dialed his phone to call the legal firm he trusted, Jonathan did something I didn't expect. He smiled that thin smile and lifted his glass. To misfortune, he said, cool as a blade. A beat. Then, from the doorway, another man stepped in, police, real police, 2 uniforms who looked like they'd been looking for trouble. Not for Jonathan. Not for Evelyn. For me. Mr. Carter? One of them asked, eyes on me like a verdict. "We need to speak with you outside. There's been a complaint filed." My stomach slowed like a clock running out of battery. They said the complaint was from a former contractor alleging irregularities in payroll, an allegation that, on paper, traced back to my name because of documents that had been shifted. It was neat and efficient, and most of all, expected. Jonathan's smile widened just slightly, the tiniest tilt that spoke of a man who'd been preparing an umbrella for the storm he'd brewed. He'd expected the bomb to go off, and he'd made sure there were traps in the explosion. Security guided me to the side room as the officers asked a few perfunctory questions. I wasn't arrested. Not yet. But they wrote down my name, the company, a date, and a detail that made a clean line down my spine: "We will need to follow up." I felt something I hadn't yet allowed myself, the cold truth that the sudden strike had changed everything. They were reeling, yes. They were exposed, yes. But they had contingency, a final card Jonathan had tucked into a sleeve. I walked back into the room like a man who'd been through a fight and lost an eye but still had both fists. The investors were on hold, the lawyer was pacing, and Jonathan's eyes met mine with a look that said, without words, "You hurt me, but you didn't win." I left then. I left with the taste of victory in my mouth and the knowledge that it might still be poison. I'd detonated the bomb. The blast had ravaged their plans, shredded reputations, and exposed the rot. But in the periphery, a new danger moved, not one I'd seen until this moment. Subscribe if you want part 5. It's the one where everything pays off, or everything collapses. Tell me below, should I burn it all down even if it costs me everything, or do I salvage the pieces and build anew? I want to hear what you'd choose. That night, when I sat alone in my kitchen with the lights off and the city breathing outside, I replayed everything in my head. The strike had been sudden, devastating, clean. It had forced their hands. It had made them show faces I'd long since stopped seeing. But Jonathan's last card, summoning the law and filing complaints that pointed at me, was the clearest reminder: this battle wasn't over. I smiled anyway. Fire leaves scars. So does blade. The worst part of revenge is that it always asks more from you than you think you have. The best part is that when it lands, it's beautiful in its cruelty. Next is where the debt gets collected, where I either walk away or take the empire with me. Either way, someone is paying in full. The world I'd known kept tally. Every slight, every clipped smile, every forged initial, somebody was keeping a running total whether I was looking or not. The difference between me and them wasn't that I kept score, it was that I was willing to write it down and hand it to people who would make them pay for it. If part 4 was the bomb, part 5 was the aftermath, cleaning the rubble, watching the faces that had once been so smug learn what accountability tastes like, and paying the personal price I'd promised myself I would. This is where revenge pays, and where sometimes it asks for more than revenge alone can give. If you've been writing this with me, hit subscribe. If you're team burn it all or team rebuild, type burn or build in the comments. I want to see what you'd risk for justice. The first morning after the luncheon felt like waking inside a movie loop. News alerts pinged, the whistleblower journalist I'd fed leaked excerpts, investors called emergency counsel, security teams mulled damage control. Jonathan put on a face of concern so practiced it could have been patented. Marcus texted, then called, then left 3 voicemails that tread the line between apology and greed. Lila sent one message: "We can fix this. Please." I read them all. I burned none of them. All evidence, every scrap of paper, every recording, every email, already backed up to 2 servers, encrypted, and distributed to people who couldn't be intimidated: the journalist, a federal whistleblower hotline, counsel for the investors who turned on Jonathan in the blink after the recording. I didn't win by lying low. I won by making their lies unworkable. But winning wasn't clean. The security guys had left an open window, the complaint they'd had me flagged on, a contractor payroll irregularity, had been filed in a way that implicated me first. Jonathan counted on the legal system to delay, to parry, to make the scandal about process rather than guilt. If I wanted finality, I had to force speed. So I did what people who have nothing to lose and everything to prove sometimes do: I cut a deal with daylight. I contacted the journalist, the same one who had posted the clip, and gave him everything. Not a drip feed, not a tease, every file, every timestamp, every whispered voicemail. I told him the truth, what I'd done to get it, why I'd had to play the fool for so long, what the records showed about Jonathan's shell companies and offshore transfers. I told him about Evelyn's role, about Marcus forging signatures and Lila's fingerprints all over the asset transfers. He asked one question that made me swallow: "Are you ready to see everything you've built burn if it means they go down?" I said yes. That answer cost me a lot. The story went live before sunset. Within hours, regulators who had been tipped quietly the night before, my lawyer and the investor partner I'd trusted to act, filed emergency motions. The company's board called for an independent audit. Investors froze accounts. The head of compliance resigned with a statement so carefully worded it read like a confession. Evelyn was suspended pending an inquiry. Marcus's drunken confession circling the web made his life a public spectacle. Friends and family called, employers looked, and people you thought would stand by you keep looking for ways to distance themselves from a stain. Lila, faded from a fiancée into a footnote in press releases. Jonathan, realizing the net was tightening, booked flights. He thought he could outrun the paperwork. He was wrong. If you're feeling the tide turn, smash that like. There's a point where the countdown begins and either you step into the light or you run. The federal agents moved with the blessed slowness of men who are always right when they act. They served subpoenas, froze accounts, executed search warrants on offices I'd been in since we were too hungry to afford late nights. They found spreadsheets with transfers to shell companies, emails with coded phrases, contracts that had been rerouted through third parties. They found a ledger under Evelyn's desk with handwritten notes about contingency fee and graceful exits. They also found the voicemail Jonathan had left his lawyer, the one where he discussed ensuring the narrative didn't get out. That message was the kind of thing prosecutors live for, motive hinted in cold logic. Jonathan's arrest warrant read like a punchline to a bad dream. They found him at the private terminal, passport in hand and a smug expression he hadn't paid to replace. He went handcuffed. His face was pale in a way money couldn't touch. Marcus's turn was uglier because it belonged to him entirely. Friends who had once celebrated the man now watched videos of him denying everything and felt the shame like a contagion. Marcus was indicted for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. He cried in court the first time, a raw, ragged thing that didn't earn him mercy. Lila, who'd been trying to negotiate a quiet exit, found no buyer for her story. The reporters had their tape. Evelyn pled out, turned state's evidence, gave names, dates, and descriptions with the cool clinical voice of someone who had decided to save herself. Her testimony was the scaffold prosecutors used to put the rest of the house on trial. In exchange for cooperation, she took a reduced sentence. It felt like justice and like a mercy both, enough to put people away, not enough to fix what they'd done. Some people asked why I hadn't simply handed everything over earlier or called the cops the moment I realized. The answer is the same I told myself when I lit the fuse in the luncheon: sometimes justice requires you to be the hand that sets the match. The system moves slow, and predators build walls. I needed walls brought down simultaneously: public exposure, investor panic, regulatory action, so there would be no place for them to hide. But justice has a way of collecting its own toll. With the arrests came scrutiny. With the audit came revealed liabilities. With the public scandal came immediate loss of credit lines and business partners pulling out like a tide receding. My company's stock dropped, then plunged. The townhouse, the house I'd scraped for, the one with the ivy and all the prayers I'd whispered into sheets at night, was put into a receivership temporarily until the accountants decided how to parse ownership. The taste of victory carried a metallic tang. They were being taken down, sure, but I'd also burned a bridge I couldn't rebuild the same way. People celebrated across comment threads and private bars, but in the cold light I realized what my victory had cost me: status, safety, a life that looked put together on paper. Here's a question: if you could get justice but at the cost of everything you've built, would you take it? Vote in the comments. I want to know where you land. There was one more thing to settle. For Marcus and Lila, I could have taken a path of petty cruelty, a smear campaign, a public humiliation that never ends. Instead, I chose something cleaner, quieter. I met them both one afternoon, separately, at a neutral diner neither of us had been to since the old days. Marcus looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. Lila looked small. "I could have destroyed you," I said to Marcus, and watched the confession crack him like a walnut. He flinched. "But breaking you wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have satisfied a part of me, sure. But I wanted the truth to be the thing that mattered." I slid the recording across the table. "This is being used. It will be used. You made your choices." He didn't cry this time. He only looked away. To Lila I said nothing at first. Silence felt like a statement. She told me she'd been afraid, of losing, of never being more than comfortable in a rented life. She asked if there was anything I wanted. Forgiveness, maybe? Understanding? I looked at her for a long time and felt all the ways love becomes a ledger: debit for the nights she left, credit for the years she was mine. I closed the tab. "You took your part," I said finally. "And you'll answer for it." Months later, the court handed sentences that satisfied half the room. Jonathan got a long federal sentence. Marcus got jail time and restitution. Evelyn got probation and community service. Lila, because she'd testified, received a plea that kept prison off the table but kept a conviction on her record. The investors recouped some losses through insurance and lawsuits. The company survived under a new leadership team, scabbed but cleaned. My name was cleared publicly, but the papers that once sang of my climb now wrote stories about scandal and cautionary tales. People who'd once congratulated me at openings now avoided eye contact. That stung in a way that legal victory couldn't soothe. I lost a business I'd loved and a home that smelled like plans. I kept a thing that mattered more: myself as a man who no longer folded when people sharpened knives for him. I had the recordings, the files, and the knowledge that what I had done had made the world a little less hospitable to cheaters like them. That felt like a small, terrible grace. The real sacrifice came later, in the quiet. Friends I'd needed had been scared off by association. My credit score took a hit, rebuilding took actual time: apprenticeship, odd consulting gigs, nights writing for a local paper about corporate ethics. I learned to be small and deliberate. I taught myself to find dignity in rebuilding. And then, one rain-heavy evening, years after I pushed play on the first recording, a man knocked on my door with a small envelope. Inside was a note from one of the investors, a man who'd once felt only numbers. He wrote, "You cost us money. You cost us peace. But you also cost us the occasion to be better. Thank you." Underneath, in a different hand, a check. Less than the mortgage I'd lost, more than I expected. A little restitution and a quiet nod that what I'd done had value beyond vengeance. That was the payoff. Not prison cells. Not headlines. It was the knowledge that the ledger closed in a way that told the truth. People were paying for what they'd done. I'd paid too, materially, emotionally, but I'd also reclaimed a life where my name meant something else than naive trust. If you made it here, drop a comment. What would you have done with the recording? Would you have exposed them publicly, or fought in court quietly? Let's talk about lines we'll cross for justice. In the end, revenge paid off because I made it pay for more than petty satisfaction. I turned my pain into proof, my humiliation into leverage, and my sacrifice into a currency that bought accountability. It cost me houses and headlines and a version of myself who slept easy in the morning. It bought me, instead, a kind of peace that's not soft but honest. I light a cigarette sometimes now, though I used to hate the things. I watch the smoke curl and think of the luncheon table, of faces frozen mid-bite, of the precise moment a recording goes from being sound to being a verdict. It's not pretty. It's not a movie. It's the real math. You give something, you get something, and sometimes what you get is worth more than what you lost. Thanks for writing this out with me. If you want a follow-up, a deep dive into how to legally protect yourself when the people you love start cutting, tell me below. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and share it with somebody who needs to hear what happens when a man stops being fooled. Until next time, keep your receipts. Keep your friends close and your recordings closer.